Welcome to the land access round table kind of thing. We have tables, they're sort of in a amoebic roundness. That's good. But I think one of the reasons that we're doing it this way is that, and we don't have a presentation, is that your access to land, tenure, whatever that looks like, is going to be really individual. And there isn't just one big slide presentation that can walk you through how to get there, because... Do you mind getting in the middle since you asked us to do it? Oh, sorry. But then I have to turn my back on these people.
All right. We know,
yeah. But that's a good point. I'll just stay up here. So anyway, so that's one of the reasons that we don't... we've done presentations in the past, and if it's an all-day workshop, sometimes that's useful. But for just an hour and a half or something like that, it's easier to kind of go around and find out where you are in your own journey. And then we can use that to sort of do some consulting and give you some idea of how we would work with a client on their land access. Again, my name is Brett Olson. I work for Renewing the Countryside, and I will let our other navigators introduce themselves, starting with you, Jennifer.
All right. Hi. Oh, goodness gracious. Sorry. Okay. Here we are. So I guess they're doing the, they have some great recording happening here, so that's why we're using the microphone, so that we can be recorded. So I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time with this microphone. My name is Jennifer Nelson, and I am a farmer. I'm also a land access navigator. I have worked with Brett for 3 years, and I work for Moses, and I actually used to do this program, the New Farmer U. So it's fun to see like what it is now. It's so great, and it's such a great way. Am I doing this wrong? It just feels like it's like...
It does do that.
Okay. So I work for Moses, and I have been working for Moses for about 6 years. We also have a farm in western Wisconsin. It's about an hour outside of St. Paul. We've gone through a few different evolutions with our farm business. This will be our 9th year in business, so that's exciting. And I have my own land access story, and I use that along with like the work and some of that to be able to relate with people and help kind of counsel people through the process of purchasing land. So Moses and Renewing the Countryside have worked together on a lot of these different USDA Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program grants, and it's been a great partnership. And so one of the big so Renewing the Countryside has funding to pay navigators, so myself and John, and I think we're the 2 that are here today. So we support beginning farmers through the process of acquiring land. So like, you know, it's not necessarily like, here's a piece of land. It's like, here are places where you can look for a piece of land, or here are people who can help you, and here is some financing options. And then they'll go and research that or meet with people or whatever. Sometimes I meet with them as well, and then come back and say, okay, so here's where I'm at. Like this happened, and they said I need this, and I don't have this, or I would like to do this, or I decided to go this route. And then we talk through that, and then I say, okay, well, have you thought about this? Or here's a resource for this. So that's kind of what that process looks like. And it can be a long process. Sometimes it can be a short process, you know, and we have 2 clients here that John has worked with that will talk through that a little bit. So, so that's the land access navigator piece. I'm also a farmer, and so have some experience that way. we wanted to have us all in a circle because this is, like Brett said, is really individual to where you're at and where you want to be at. It's regional, it's all those things. And so I think it helps us to, there's a worksheet in your binder that is the necessary, I think it's a necessary, desirable, optional worksheet. So it kind of helps you refine through, like if you're let me just do this. How many people own or rent land in this room? Okay, and then how many people have a business plan for what you want to do with your farm business? Okay, that's great, that's great. And there's, like, we're all at different places, and that's what we do, right? So this sheet in here, it helps you kind of refine your farm dream and what you wanna work towards. And you can use it even as you continue to refine your business plan. I think I'll just give a little history about my farm access story, and then I'm gonna hand it over to John. And then we're gonna go around and introduce ourselves and kind of talk about where we're at. Okay, so that's what this today looks like. So we bought a place. So, okay, in 2009, I started working for a farm. I have a teaching degree, so I was teaching kids before that, and I've had a couple of different, I've had a couple of different lives, as we do. And so I started working for a farm, and I met my partner, and we just knew that we wanted to farm. So we did Farm Beginnings with LSP, and we had worked for a certified organic vegetable farm, a larger farm, and I knew a lot of vegetable farmers. So I was like, okay, what can we do to make money? We decided to grow cut flowers, and so we grew cut flowers. And this was in 2013 when we started our business, and there were not very many people. Now there's a lot of people doing cut flowers. But there weren't that many people at that time. And so it really blew up, and it was awesome and so great and so fun. And so we were an incubator farm. So we worked for a larger farm near the Twin Cities called Gardens of Egan. That farm was owned by the Wedge Co-op, and then now it's been sold. Twin Organics is there now. But we lived there. My partner Mike worked there for 10 years. And then we lived there for 3 years in the caretaker residence. I worked there periodically, and then we had our son, and we incubated our farm there. And so we rented land, we rented machinery, we, worked with them, and it was very helpful for us in starting our business. And I love, and like Moses, I know, has done a lot of work with Kilimo Min and incubator farm. If you want to get started, it can be a great way to do that. For us, it really worked well. And so in our third year, that farm where we lived, and it was our salary, and our son was 2.5, and we were renting land for our farm. They told us on April 13th that they were going to put the farm on the market in 2 weeks, and we had to figure out what we were going to do. And so we were able to harvest our crops and get all of our stuff off of there, and we didn't actually have to move until later in the year, but it was very jarring, and we weren't really ready. We needed at least 1 more year to figure out our business plan, and we had a 2.5-year-old. It was hard, but we were able to find a place in western Wisconsin. It was the first place we looked at. I was like, we can't buy the first place we looked at, but we did, and we were able to get FSA funding because we had enough experience. And so we bought that farm with FSA funding, and that's where we are now. So FSA has really helped us a lot. If you need any support, figuring out that whole bag of tricks, I have a lot of insight on that. Anyway, so now we've been there 6 years, and so we continued doing cut flowers through 2019 in 2020, and then we had also been doing some vegetables and upping our starter plant production. We had put up a greenhouse, a hoop house, and some other things. So anyway, I had been getting like progressively more sick because I was working so much and I had Lyme disease. And so I finally, in 2019, had a positive test for that, and then have kind of gone through a journey of healing. And, you know, it's just kind of like an up and down process of managing it, really. And so so we decided to stop doing cut flowers, and we do more starter plants because that's more Mike's deal, and the cut flowers were more my deal. And so it shortens our season. It just makes it a little bit more manageable. And then I continue to work for Moses. We still have our son, who is now 8, and so that's our story. And so we've come into this place in western Wisconsin. It's an hour outside of St. Paul. When we moved there, we were in such a like, okay, we got to find a place. And we were so focused on what we needed for the farm business that we didn't really think through like the community and like what that meant, and like, where is our son going to go to school and all those things. And so that was a big process. Like, for the first 3 years of us living there, I was kind of like, what did we do? You know, it was just a really different spot. So anyway, I tell you that in saying, like, there's different levels to think about as you're accessing land, right? You want to think about what makes sense for your farm business, what makes sense for community, you know, what is safe for your family. And you know, there's a number of other things. But anyway, that's my story. And I'm going to pass it over to John, and I want to hear, so John is also a navigator. He's up here in this area, and he's worked with Emily and this John on finding land, and they're going to share their stories.
Oh, I got a mic right here.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. Let's give me a little more cord. There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Yep. My name is John Beaton, and let's see. I'm entering my 3rd year working as a navigator, and this has been one of the best experiences of my life. It's been really awesome. I kind of had a ambition once we bought our farm in 2018 to kind of help other people get there too, because we had a really, I feel like we had a really unique way that we found our farm. We connected directly with the landowner, my wife and I, through a mutual friend. And we actually ended up getting along really well. And we actually ended up renting from Linda, was her name, for about 9 months before we bought the farm, and living on site at the farm. And so I got this perspective of, well, I know what me and Emily are going through. Different Emily. Sorry, it's all Emily's and John's. I know, it's ridiculous. And so I got this unique perspective. You know, we worked with a bank, and so we kind of figured that out. But then we also got to see the landowner, Linda. We got to see her kind of like, kind of detach herself from this land and all the emotions that kind of went along with that. But at the same time, we were able to keep it. We had the same goal in mind. You know, we both wanted it to happen, because for Linda, it was a way for her to kind of stay connected to the land. And now she's our honorary CSA member. She comes back to the farm periodically, and she's one of our CSA drop-off points in town and stuff. So it was a great deal. It was a huge challenge, but we worked through it. And so we bought that farm because I had started a vegetable CSA several years prior, rented land from a bigger farm that I worked at. And so I had that experience as well, just like you, Jennifer, of kind of having a really awesome kind of incubation period where I could try some things out and start the business and start the record keeping, which is really, really important. And then, so we bought that farm in 2018. And so all that information is still a little fresh in my mind. And I think it was even that year that I kind of developed this kind of pet project. I didn't have any resources, no connections. I just thought, man, I want to help other people do this, because we had all of these advantages and And, you know, my parents were able to help finance some of the farm, and so was Emily's. Emily's parents actually bought the farm with us, where we jointly owned the farm, and they lived with us for 3 years. And so it's like, we had these advantages, and I thought, you know, there's people out there without those. And we were able to achieve our goal of buying that farm because of our connections within the community. And I thought, man, if someone moves to the area or is new, they're not going to come loaded with those community connections, which I think is the most important part. It's about kind of who you know and who is in your network, because that direct connection to the landowner was a really powerful thing and really helped us out a lot. So, and so I think it was 2018 or 2019, went to a land access conference in Red Wing, and I just raised my hand during the presentation by RTC, and I said, "This is awesome. How do I do this? How can I do this?" And Jan said, "Oh, well, we've got, I think we got some extra funding." Ended up training a whole other cohort of people, and brought me on board, and it was really awesome. And yeah, and then the other thing that I think is really neat about this program is that it's so kind of regional specific, or specific to where the navigators are. Like, I have built up over a decade of living and working in the Duluth area, all these connections to different folks, and I have involved with the Lake Superior Sustainable Farming Association, vast network of farmers. And so it's kind of like, now when a beginning farmer connects with me, I can instantly kind of connect them to all the other farms and all the other resources that are right around us that I used like relatively recently to get our farm and kind of create our farm business. So it's been a really, really awesome experience. And I like how we're all kind of sharing our stories, and I'm excited to hear from you all too, because I think telling your story is really important. That's one thing I really emphasize to everyone I work with, is tell your story and describe what it is you want. Like, if you can't do that, you will never find what you want. It's like going to the store, knowing in your mind what you want, but you never tell anybody. You're not going to just kind of, it's not going to fall in your lap. You have to describe in detail what you want. I think there's a lot of power to that. So, yeah, so that's my navigator, information about my navigator position. I forgot to mention our farm. Our farm is a CSA farm. We grow vegetables. We also grow starter plants, which has been really good for us. And now we're trying to develop a kind of event and gathering space at our farm so we can host pizza nights and be a pizza farm in the north. So, yeah, so I'll pass it on to Emily, who's a great friend of mine and land access client. And maybe you can just tell a little bit about your story, and maybe some ways that I can chime into, of ways we interacted. And because you've got a great story too, so always.
Hi, everybody. My name is Emily Ritchie. I grew up in Duluth and have lived around Minnesota and out east. That guy is my partner. That's Kyle. He'll be a part of this story too. So I now live in Two Harbors on a farm that Kyle and I landed on almost exactly a year ago. We bought the property on November 1st of 2020. So coming to kind of this like full year there, which is really cool. But it was a several multi-year process to get there. I left college in 2012 knowing that I wanted to work on farms, and so I did. This was before Kyle was in my life, and moved to New England, worked on farms out there for a couple years, moved back to Duluth one fall when I was broke and cold and didn't have a winter job lined up, and just lived with my mom and worked at the Whole Foods Co-op in Duluth, and started working on farms in northern Minnesota, which is where I was like, grew up. So I had deep community connections, but the last time I had lived there, I was a teenager, and when I was a teenager, had absolutely no interest in farming, because I was a teenager. And so came back to my hometown with this new goal and perspective, and was shocked at what I found. Coming from living in Vermont, which is like the mecca of local small food systems, I came back to Duluth thinking like, this doesn't exist in northern Minnesota. What? But it does. And ended up working on some farms there, like the food farm in Renshaw and Round River Farm up in Finland. Started to get really connected, like John is talking about, with the food and agriculture community in northeastern Minnesota. And eventually decided this is where I wanted to be, which I never expected. Kyle and I met in 2017, and then in 2019, we got the opportunity, the farm Round River Farm in Finland, which I had managed previously, offered us another management job, or essentially to take over the business for the year. And so Kyle and I moved to Finland and did that. So it was essentially like a rented land situation. It wasn't as clean as that, but that's what it was. We didn't own the land, but we were farming and running our business off of it, which we got kind of our first taste of like, oh, I'm not just an employee on a farm or a manager of someone else's farm. I'm, making decisions and, spending money. Not big decisions. We weren't building infrastructure or anything like that, but making business decisions about like when our delivery days were going to be and what we were going to plant and how it's all going to work, which was really awesome that we were doing it on essentially our mentor farmers' land, because we got amazing advice and the camaraderie in that and the community in that. But had kind of this underlying feeling that staying in that space wasn't gonna be our end all forever. We loved being there. It's a beautiful place. The land is amazing. David and Lisa, who own that farm. The driveway is pretty intense, yes. That fall, I got a random, well, it wasn't random. I took a total 180 in my career and opened a retail store in Duluth. So got out of the farm business for a little bit, opened the Great Lakes Gear Exchange, which is an outdoor gear consignment store, which is my like random, I'm gonna go over here right now. And did that and was like full in that world for a good solid year. But the whole time when we were moved back to Duluth and we're opening this store, Kyle and I were really thinking about like, how the heck do we get back on land? What does that look like? Do we like buy a piece of raw land and start there? Do we rent more land? Do we thought about every option in the book. Do we buy land with friends? Do we buy land? Do we like buy like a tiny piece of land in town and start there and build some equity so then we can like, we'll just grow in the backyard, and then, later on we could sell that house to buy a bigger place. Like, we like tried to puzzle piece every option you could together, particularly in the financial piece, right? Because I was a new business owner. Kyle at the time was working for a brewery, So I'm trying to figure that out. Got connected with John, and I have been friends for a long time, but got connected with John as a land access coordinator in like late 2019, maybe?
Something like that. Yep.
Which
It went pretty quick.
Yeah, it did. Learned that John had this awesome new job and was like, okay, cool. You've gone through this farm buying experience yourself, and also now you have this the Renewing the Countryside and all of their expertise and Moses and plus all of your personal connections behind you. How can we put our brains together to come up with some solution? And so, things that John really was helpful with was being able to help me navigate the world of FSA funding or other funding opportunities. We didn't end up going that route, but like I knew if I needed it, I would have been able to talk to you. And then you also just like hooked us up with other farmers that were looking to sell their land. And so, yeah, there's kind of a,
We toured my neighbor's farm.
yeah.
He was potentially thinking it, that didn't work, but
No,
it was
yeah.
kind of interesting to kind
Yeah,
of go
and there
walk
was
around.
another couple that, you know, same sort of thing, were trying to sell their farm down here in Finlayson that I talked with on the phone for a long, long time. We never ended up going down there, but there's kind of this, a very kind joke that John is like the old farmer whisperer in our, our community. You happen to just know a lot of aging farmers who were maybe trying to find new owners of their property. So yeah, we did a lot of that with John's help of just like connecting with people, and I talked to them on the phone. I'm a pretty extroverted person, so like I was totally comfortable cold calling people. I know that is not everybody's feelings about just like talking to a random stranger on the phone about their like life's investment on their farm. But you know, maybe that if that's not what you want to do, you could call and just say, hi, could we meet up for a cup of coffee or something like that. The other thing that Kyle and I did a lot of, which was just kind of our own doing, we would drive around a lot. Particularly, this was in the beginning of like COVID when we were bored. We would drive around, you know, maybe take a detour on the way to go to do something or whatever, go the back way and just look around. And we would be like, oh, that's a farm, cool. Like, you know, we would just find properties that were like, that looks cool. Put a pin on our Google Maps, and then we would go home and look it up on the St. Louis County or Lake County Land Explorer, which I think most counties should have. Which is just parcel information. And so we would then look it up that so-and-so and so-and-so own that place, and then we would write them a letter and mail it to them. Which again is kind of that like cold call thing. We probably sent 25 letters, something like that. We didn't get a lot of responses, but it was like, it felt really good to like, be kind of like what John was saying of like, and Jen too, of like, you got to know what you want, and then you have to tell the world what you want. And so us doing that by like sending letters to landowners was one way to do that. We were also just like talking about it a lot to like rent, like to our friends or whatever, like, because you just kind of put that energy out into the world and you never know what you're going to get. Kyle and I, very similarly to John and Emily, our lives have like kind of had this amazing parallelness to them, have had a just ridiculously amazing opportunity where we've had financial support from our families to buy land. Kyle's mom actually ended up buying the farm with us, which wouldn't have happened without her, essentially. So.
Tell them how you found the farm, though.
Yes, totally. I was getting there. So that piece, the financial piece in land access is like massive, right? Like that piece is something that we struggled with for a long time of trying to like figure that out of like, oh God, okay. Well, you know, if what would a bank give us in a loan? What could we access through FSA funding? Kyle is a veteran. Could we use like VA loan support to buy a farm? And there's like so many rules with that and like whatever. We explored every option. And then had this wonderful moment when Kyle's mom was like, actually, maybe I would help you. And so how we found the farm that we're on, which is in Two Harbors, Minnesota, we're calling the place Agate Acres. Agate is a rock. It's a 100-year-old Finnish homestead that was in the same family for 100 years. Or Finnish dairy is what I should have said instead of homestead. And we found that place, we heard about it in July of 2020. Some other good friends of ours, John Hatcher and Heather Marie Bloom, who live here in Barnum now, We're also on the same farm journey of like trying to find a place.
I was also working with them as they were Navigator clients as well. So.
Exactly. And so we were both like posting on Instagram, and like we figured out that we were both kind of in this world of like trying to find a home. And so I talked to Heather Marie about this, and I was like, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What are you doing? And she said, oh, well, I put a classified in the newspaper, in a lot of newspapers, like in the Duluth News Tribune in town, but then also in like small local newspapers. Because who reads newspapers in 2021? Older? Great, good, yes. I love to read the newspaper too, but it's more common to have older people reading the newspaper, and particularly things like classifieds, right? And so her and John, because everybody's named John, Heather Marie and her partner John, put these classifieds in the newspaper that said like, looking for a farm, or looking to buy a farm, must have a house and 15 acres, or whatever. They're requirements, they're like necessary things, and their phone numbers. And like, they put that out in the newspaper. I learned this idea and was like, sweet, we should do this too. So about a month after Heather Marie had put hers in there, because I didn't want like conflicting things, Kyle and I wrote up our little classified and put it in a couple newspapers, and never heard anything.
Which is weird, 'cause Heather Marie got like a dozen responses.
Exactly. So then in July of 2020, I was working in my store, and Heather Marie and John came in, which was awesome. I hadn't seen them in a long time. And they had just moved into their new house, their new farm here in Barnum. And so talking with them, I was like super excited to hear about their new place. Super just happy to see my friends too in July of 2020, right? And I asked them, like, how did you find it? Like, how did your classified work? And they're like, yeah, I totally did. We got like a dozen responses. And I was like, what? We didn't get any. Huh, great, that's awesome. And then they're telling me about their spot. It's like pretty much the perfect setup for them. And then I said, well, what about the other 11 responses? Like, could you share them with me? And John says, well, what are you looking for? And the things that Kyle and I had, that whole like put your energy out in the world thing, we had like written down so many times, like, what is the things we want to make our business work, to make our souls happy in a community and on a piece of land that we can manage and feel like is home. What are our requirements financially? We've written all of those types of things down. So I shared that with John and said, like, we would love to live between Duluth and Two Harbors. We'd love to have a house that's livable, because Margaret was going to come live with us. She needed, like, Kyle and I would be more comfortable, like, living in a place that needed a lot of work, but Margaret didn't want that. Cool. It needed to have good soil, because we wanted to be vegetable farmers, and in northern Minnesota there's a lot of rocks and there's a lot of clay, so we needed good soil. And to have some sort of infrastructure would be nice, like a garage or a barn or a chicken coop, like things like that. And the last thing I told John was the cherry on top would be if there was water on the property, just because it would be amazing. And John said, I have the place for you. And that's the place we bought. I didn't learn about the other 10 places, but so John gave us the email of the person who was selling this farm. It was being sold off the market. And so that's the place we bought. And it took 6 months to buy because it was off the market and a unique situation. Oh, we did send a letter to him too. Arnold is the gentleman we bought it from. And yeah, so it's been quite the massive journey, but I'm like an emotional roller coaster at times, and exciting, but really it has come down to that community piece, that.
And in your case and my case, the direct connection to the landowner. Totally. Because right now, if that piece of property comes on the market, it's going to get instantly bought.
Yep.
So if you can find ways to connect directly with that landowner and then say, I want to be a farmer,
Yeah.
right? Did
That was what,
factor in? No?
totally. So the man that we bought our farm from needed to sell his farm. He was very ill. He'd been living there alone for the last 10 years. He would have sold his farm 10 years ago if he could have. But he was very afraid that it was going to get bought and then turn into a bunch of 5-acre parcels. And so he didn't put it on the market. But in our letter, we described, like, we're Emily, we're Kyle, here's a little bit of our history. This is what we want to do. We want to feed our community. We want to provide a space for community members to come and connect with their food system. We want a home, right? Like, and so in sending that letter, we were able to communicate our intentions before we even met him, of like, we're not going to buy your parcel, this chunk of land, and then turn around and sell it for, you know, build a bunch of subdivisions on it or whatever. Yeah, so that I don't know. Those are my biggest takeaways, is like, tell the world what you want, connect with your community, get a little bit out of your comfort zone of like, you're asking a really big thing, right? You're asking this kind of uncomfortable thing too. But you got to tell people that it's what you're looking for, and like be down for the ride, because it might be a ride. And yeah, just kind of rely on the resources that exist around you. So.
And work with a navigator.
Yeah, and I was one of these folks. And then you also just like get good friends out of it too, which is great.
And John has a bit different story because
Yeah.
you used a realtor in your case, and that came from afar. So.
Yeah, still some of the same, parallels that we heard from, Emily and John. So, my story started 6-7 years ago with the birth of our youngest, my son Grayson, where I had to move on kind of from my career life to, help take care of him as my wife's career had progressed and was in the middle of a, big career move. And I decided I was burnt out, like a lot of people are, with some of their careers, and I wanted to get into what's next, what's my next career. And at that point, I spent years really figuring that out, really identifying what I wanted, what we were looking for, settled on farming, and then decided I really needed to find, community to be a part of, and that was a key part of this. So spent all these years waiting and planning and figuring out where we wanted to go. We were living in northern Colorado and really settled on, Duluth, Minnesota. We looked at Vermont, Western Massachusetts, Finger Lakes, New York, really identified maybe 10 different places in the country we wanted to potentially be a part of that farm community. But it always kept coming back to Duluth. So I spent a lot of time learning about the people there, learning about the community, looking at farms, seeing what everyone was doing in that area. But my biggest challenge was I didn't know how I was going to get there from Colorado. There was a lot of challenges. COVID was the biggest one. We had put our house on the market. My wife was in interviews for work. She's a nurse practitioner. And 2020 April, she was doing interviews. We're going to move. And suddenly the interviews stopped, right? Because of the health crisis, not hiring anymore. Well, we just sold our house. What are we going to do? It's like we'd put all this time and energy into getting out there, and then there was suddenly a lot of roadblocks. And at that point, I should have immediately found, Renewing the Countryside, someone like John. But I felt really reserved. Well, what if I don't ever get out there? I'm going to waste someone's time, try to have, connect with these local guys and then flake out and never come. So one of my biggest challenges was coming from a whole nother part of the country to try and buy farmland in a brand new place. And things progressed. Suddenly jobs came back up. My wife is getting in interviews. I'm like, okay, well, now I need to reach out and talk to somebody. Well, she got the job the next day, and it was, you're going to start in 30 days. I'm like, oh my gosh, I spent all this time planning, and here I am. I need to buy a farm now, right? And so really condensed version of what Emily kind of went through, I had to go through all those steps quickly. My wife had to live in the hostel downtown because short-term rentals wasn't going to work. I'm bouncing around family across the country, trying to, keep the family going through all of this. So we were kind of like this disheveled mess, and talked to a local farmer and said, hey, just help me out here. Who do I need to talk to? How do I get started on this? She said, oh, well, why don't you start with, the SFA, talk to Julie at the Sustainable Farm Association for Lake Superior. And she said, oh, well, you need to connect with John Beaton because this is what he does. He connects, potential farmers, beginning farmers to land and find that land access. But, I came to John with this, we really got to figure this out quickly. And he was able to give me, I filled out the intake form, which was really, easy. Then I filled out the, kind of goals and dreams and what do I want, the questionnaires, and really reestablished what I wanted to do with the farm business. I knew community was going to be a big part of it. But here I am facing, a crazy real estate market, kind of approaching it. Well, I have a realtor, right, who it's kind of common realty was how we were approaching it because we needed, that solution. And every farm we came across or any kind of, farm property was just getting bought up like that. It was, 2 days on the market, goes for $100,000 above asking price cash, right? So we failed like 5-6 times. John, was coaching me at the same time from this other perspective. I've, busy realtor guy over here getting me to do it in one way. And John's like, hold on, take these steps, told me about what Emily did. I started posting, on the Moses site, different land access hubs, trying to find and connect with that farmer, right? Or that, maybe not a farmer, but someone who wanted their property to go to, someone who's going to care for it, grow food, be a part of that system. And so on the one side, I was getting these really cold, business experiences trying to buy a farm. Could never talk to the people, hey, can I write a letter? Well, we don't do that in realty anymore. Like trying to explain our story, how we wanted to use the land, what we wanted to do. And he's like, no, we don't do that. And people get upset if you do that. And the realtors get upset. The owners don't. So I'm trying to figure that out, right? And eventually John said, you really got to build that personal connection and have that chance to really talk through. So we took a step back and tried to start finding different ways to do that, not knowing the area very well, getting resources from John, and really seeking out those opportunities to connect with somebody and really find a property that's going to make sense. So in the end, that's what we were able to do was we just showed up to an open house without the realtor, and the owners were there and had a chance to talk to them, had a chance to say, well, I see you've got, these garden spaces. What were you growing? How are you using the land? How long have you been here? Making that connection. And that made all the difference in the world. They instantly felt comfortable with our vision for what we would use the land with. And I think the owners, that's their primary, they want to see it be used properly down the road. So on a short timeline with different challenges of not knowing the area, renewing the countryside and working with John really helped me, navigate those steps to where even in that short period of time, I had so much growth to get there. In addition to that, I've been able to connect, it's community. So he was able to connect me with 5 or 6 other local farms in my area. So I've been able to go and volunteer. Emily, John, another great family a mile down the road, another group of people half a mile away, really start to already, I've been here 3 months, I already feel like, I have so much progress. I've learned so much. I understand the area so much more in that short term. And it's, I wish I called probably a year earlier. I can only imagine where I'd be right now, so that'd be my biggest advice is don't be reserved about, reaching out to people to get help earlier. I was learning on my own. I was doing all these steps on my own. I needed help, right? And I needed to connect with, other farm owners. Now I've put up 2 hoop houses. Now I know how to do it myself. I'm going to do some timber framing. I'll know how to do it myself. So building those skills is a big part of this as well, as a new farmer. So it's not just, connecting with farm owners, but it's that connection to the community that made a big difference for me.
Thanks, John. Yeah. So I think we take bits, like just even from these 2 stories, like there's really important pieces in there. There's no silver bullet, right? There's no way that, and we do get that as navigators. It's like, I want a farm. And I'm like, okay. And especially now, given, there's a lot of people with resources from the suburbs that are in my area buying up some of these little 20-acre farmsteads really quickly and above asking price just because they want a place in the country or whatever. One of the things that I've been working on now as a navigator is some creative land access. We're working with American Farmland Trust on buying some land. It's called Buy, Protect, Sell. Buying some land and then putting an easement on it, which brings down the cost. And so again, each of us navigators, there are some different ways, don't feel, it's easy to feel discouraged when you go on Zillow because it's just wait, what? What is going on? So, don't even do that. I don't know. Do whatever you need to do. But I'm just saying, there are other ways that we can do this. And I think that personal connection, there are people in the country, there are people in the city that have land that want to find somebody that's going to steward that land in a meaningful way, growing food or whatever, So, yeah, so I think it's important to keep that in mind. This can be a, up and down process, and we can help.
And I'll add, that's kind of we have to play to our advantages as farmers. The corporate farms that sell vegetables, they cannot compete with me because I can shake the hand of my customer. That is my advantage. Much the same way we can buck these market trends by saying, well, okay, let's not buy and try to compete with these people who have many or greater resources than us. We can actually kind of use our community connections and our roots in the actual landscape itself to kind of subvert some of these trends and make sure that the land is used and grown on. Yes, of course.
I don't want to cut you off.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're at 9:56, so we have about a half an hour more.
Okay.
So after Emily says what she wants to say, I think if we could go around and do
Yeah.
even 3 minutes, just like where you're from, where you're at with land access, and then how we can help you.
Cool.
Okay, so like what community, where you're at.
Just the one thing that I wanted to say is hearing your story, John, about working with a realtor. Buying land is freaking complicated, right? Like, there's so many rules and paperwork and like, oh my God. And when you're like, anyway, not every, like, that's why you hire a realtor, because they have the expertise of like all the I's you need to dot and the T's you need to cross and all the rules and inspections and whatever. And it's different all over the place. So having a realtor is like incredibly helpful because they know how to navigate that world. They're your realty navigator. But having the right person is also incredibly helpful. So this summer was an insane time to buy property for anyone, right? Because like every realtor was pushed to their absolute limit. Granted, this story is incredibly like my story, right? So, but just to share, so our like, we bought it in our place in 2020. The market was a little less crazy, but still busy. And we had a longer time frame because it was off market, but it wouldn't have happened without our realtor because she helped us immensely, right? Like with all of the paperwork you need to do and all the inspections and things like that. But something that I'm incredibly grateful for is that she was so down to learn. Like she normally sells, you know, houses in town to people, single family homes, right? And she sold homes in the country that have acreage and stuff like that. But I was maybe her first customer that was like looking for a home and a place for my business. And I don't know, so like I taught her how to use the USDA soil map thing, and she was elated. She was like, this is so cool. I can do this with so many of my other clients, even if they're not wanting to be farmers, even if they just want to have a garden in their backyard, or they're curious about, you know. So I guess the thing I just wanted to share is that if you have the time to connect with the right realtor, like to interview people and tell them exactly what you're looking for, and if they have any experience with that, or if they're even willing to learn. So Danielle, who we worked with, had never sold a farm before, or bought a farm before, but she was super down to be like, I want to teach me things, right? Because it'll help her in her business. And she's just a curious human. So I guess that's also a good thing too, is find the right person, not only to help you find land, like these two lovely humans, but also navigate the real estate process because it's complicated to begin with. And then at this current moment is absolutely overwhelming. So, yeah.
So I was just going to say, to tag on to Emily, that is part of our goal with the Renewing the Countryside Land Access Program. Is we're building this pool of realtors that understand food farming and like what our needs are, and lenders that are down for the cause, and appraisers. Like you're right, like it's very complicated. There's a lot of levels to it, but we do have people. We are deepening our pool of people that we work with, and it's been really cool to see that.